Great. Hello, Marlene. Thank you for being on the podcast today. We are thrilled to welcome you on Send It podcast.
Thank you so much for welcoming me. Very excited as well to have this conversation with you too.
Could you share with us how did you start your connection with art in general?
Yeah, well, I guess it started in New York actually when I was doing an internship. At the beginning, I started my education in business actually, so I was in New York for that purpose. But then I started to go in the galleries in New York, very much enjoying pop art, post-war art as well. And after that, I decided I wanted to study art history. And so I went to the Corto in London and I studied art, the whole category of history of art, but specifically post-war art as well, which echoed to my trip to New York. And this was 15 years ago. So since then, I've been evolving in the art market, especially contemporary art. I worked for White Cube, I worked for Christie's, I had my own art advisory as well, all of this in London. And then actually I moved to Switzerland when Odo BHF, the private bank, the Franco-German private bank, asked me to create their art advisory department. So I've been in Switzerland for that for a couple of years. And then in 2021, it's when the Web3 space hit me somehow, when a friend of mine contacted me because he founded La Collection. The founder of La Collection was actually a friend of mine from my business school. And he said, I'm doing this. Do you want to be the art expert on the platform? And then I said yes.
Just for understanding, La Collection is closed now as well, right? Not to be a downer here, but...
Yes, exactly, Nick. It's in liquidation. And
Okay.
What happened is a bit the same as Maker's Place, where La Collection actually raised money in 2021, exactly like Marketplace. 10 million. I think Marketplace was 40 millions. And we arrive now at these 5 years investment horizons for VCs. And it's when, they need to basically continue or close. And even though actually the company was profitable and we still had cash in the bank, I think the fact that they didn't have any expertise within the VC in Web3, in crypto, it looked too risky for them to continue the adventure.
Would you have any advice for potential other people who are thinking about building a collection and thinking about working with VCs and stuff that they should or shouldn't do in retrospect?
For me, I think we shouldn't have VCs in the art world, actually. And when you look at the traditional art world, there is no investors. I don't think it works this way in that market. A persona market. And it's a market that is very complex, which is opaque, that has its complexity. Except if you have a VC with the proper art market expertise, but most of them don't have it. They are going to be, they're going to try to work and advise like a commercial market, like we're selling carrots. I'm being very cliche here, but it's just so to give you an understanding of it. And it's what I felt like they were trying to plug very commercial behaviors to the business, which doesn't work that way at all. And they did not understand the time that it needs, the setting that it needs to succeed. And for me, it's a shame because actually I think there is a lot of money as a VC to be made in the art world, but they have to get the expertise. Otherwise, it's too slow.
It's a different type of investment. It feels to me like it was this weird intersection where, because it's a new technology, the VC is the person who's aware of this opportunity. But I don't know how well you know Gagosian's or Hauser and Wirt's financial backing.
Yeah, I worked for White Cube for many years, which is one of their main competitor. Like White Cube shares a lot of artists with Gagosian, for instance.
How did they start the financing until they got?
They didn't need financing.
The
business of art, if it's set up properly, doesn't need financing too much. Or maybe one private like collector that is connected to the gallery. This I heard several times, but it's a different game. It's not a VC that will ask you every year and that will push and also will have an impact on your strategy. But Joplin Gagosian, they started with artists they believed in, and they helped them build their career. And then step by step, they continued the journey. But for instance, White Cube that I know most, they have no financing. It's all own, it's developed it developed on its own, and Jay had a White Cube, actually, 9 meter by 9 meter by 9 meter in Soho in London in the 90s. And then step by step, the business grew and he could buy or rent a bigger space. And now, there are galleries all over the world. But it came naturally, organically.
I think the way I digest this now, and I agree 100% with you with your take, is what is also not to be underestimated is with Gagosian and Co. is their artists which they chose and selected also explosively grew in value. So that's on the back of that, without pressure of investors and maybe just a few private people who continuously bankroll is maybe a strong word, but continuously support is the right way for an art gallery to grow.
Exactly. You pull of collectors, you support your artists, you work with museums as well to make sure that tomorrow they are part of art history. You support them at auction as well. I mean, Larry, Harder, J. Jopling, when one of their artists is at auction, they are there in the room and they make sure the price don't go down. So it's really pushing the career in museums and institutions, but also very closely managing the market as well, where prices.
And then the other thing what I always found astonishing is that sorry, I don't mean to interrupt your the whole podcast, but the other thing what I found astonishing is that in our world, something which was such a mistake was those platforms are behaving like galleries. They are galleries, 100% galleries. Because you had this weird thing where there was this like huge noise, so you want some sort of differentiation by curating, you're selecting the things you're going to sell. And that immediately puts you into the category of like gallery. You start handpicking, you start, all the things that a gallery is supposed, or some of the things a gallery is supposed to do. But actually VCs and investors, they want you to build the next eBay. They don't want you to build like a little, a beautiful little gallery that works, because that forces you to close down when things get a little tighter.
Yes, and I think galleries, the business of galleries, it's quite complicated because you have a lot of fixed costs. Like you pay for the booth, you pay for your gallery space, you pay for your staff, but your revenues are all variables. It's how much you're going to sell. And I think this is what is very scary for VCs. It's this variability. And maybe you're going to have one good year. Next time it's going to be more complicated. It's also hard to predict. And sometimes you're going to have a great artist, but it's not going to sell. It's not going to sell today. Maybe it will sell tomorrow, but not now. And it's fine. And you have to accept this. And for me, it's also a lot about branding, developing your brand internationally towards collectors, again, towards institutions. But the cost they are facing is important. And that is why recently, also the reason why we have 010 at Art Basel, it's because a lot of galleries, traditional art galleries, are closing because they cannot accept those costs anymore. And we had clearing closing. I mean, we had very, very top traditional art galleries closing in the past years. And I think because the cost on them are too heavy as well, they are in between the artist and the fairs and that system. And they are carrying, yes, the most important risk. And I think it's interesting also today for the digital art space, but also for the traditional contemporary art space, to look at that business and maybe try to reinvent it and offer a different perspective. Because yes, Gagosian, Hauser and Wirth, White Cube, they are untouchable. With what they built now, it's untouchable. But for the next generation of galleries, and I've looked at that for the past 15 years, there is not a new gallery that entered that sphere for the past 20 years. It's like, the barrier at entry is huge. And maybe it's actually impossible to enter today. So we need something new. And this is where Web3 can bring something interesting also, I think.
And for people who might not be that familiar with the Gagosian and White Cubes and what is the competitive advantage, are you talking here about the super galleries, as in having super large spaces in multiple cities and being able to attend all the Art Basel fairs, for example, and Frieze and so on?
Exactly, and also the artists they represent. They've been pushing their career since 20 years. So those artists are brands as well, and they are well known and they are everywhere in the world in all museums. They have retrospectives in museums. I mean, when we looked at, recently, for instance, Georg Baselitz passed away, is at White Cube, is at Tadeusz Ropak as well. And they've been with him for like 30 years, more than 30 years, pushing his career. And those artists are very important for the turnover of those galleries, obviously. So it's a work that has been done over time. And if you arrive now today, it's going to take forever for you to reach that level. And also for me, this is where there is a parallel with fashion. I feel like Gagosian, White Cube, Hauser, again, are really huge brands. And it's not only the artists that create the turnover, it's also the brand. And as you said, Jean-Jacques, all the locations, like they are everywhere around the world. They participate in every art fair. They have publications. So they are followed by also Christie's. Also, they work very closely with the auction house. And I think this is what's missing in the space. We're just working on primary market. But what's important, if you want to make history, it's the secondary market. And today we are barely talking about it in the Web3 space. And it's not at auction, barely at auction. We saw some little interesting moments where Christie's notably tried at Miami to do Web3 auctions, but it's still not enough. And this is where, when the secondary market will grow, that I think digital art will take more space in contemporary art.
Do you think it's about the price of the secondary market?
For me, it's about time, as always. I mean, it's not like when you drop an artwork on the primary market, it's not healthy to put it on the secondary market straight away. And this is what Web3 is doing all the time. The rule in Web3 is sold out, secondary market straight away on OpenSea or anything. But this is actually crushing the artist market. And this is really actually damaging what we are trying to build for them over the long term. And I saw that many times with actually collectors putting it in the market lower than how much we sold it the day before. And I'm like, even as an investment perspective, it doesn't make sense. And just so you know, in traditional galleries, collectors who would do that would be blacklisted and their names will be everywhere and they will not be able to buy for a couple of years. But in the space, it's a behavior that hasn't been controlled. And I think this is also part why the secondary market is still in the making in the Web3 space. Both the recognition from the traditional art market and auction houses, who are the head of this secondary market, and also behaviors of flippers that we have in that.
The thing is, can you control things on the internet or not? That's an interesting question.
Well,
yeah,
maybe
you can. When people come and take a number at Christie's, they know who is in the room, and if this person is not supporting the market, they don't accept.
Technically, today, I think we could use like SAL-bound tokens and smart contract restriction. So we could make sure we identify who is owning what, and also potentially prohibiting people to sell an artwork before a certain period of time. I would be curious to see how many collectors go down that route, but technically with Web3, I think we could do such an experiment. It's an interesting one.
It's what is just an observation I had when you talk about these things is that we don't realize, but in the art market is way more advanced. We live in this weird world with AI now where everything is abundant, including art in a way, but everybody can generate as much art as they want. Whether or not it's art is a different question. But the observation is we already have a Web3 world in art where in most industries it doesn't exist at all. And in art, we lived through this. We saw the benefits, we saw the negatives. Now we see it. We can directly plug into AI. So in some ways, we're actually way more advanced in the art market than the rest of the world and the rest of all other industries. And with that, it's I'm really curious to see now with the dawn of AI what people are going to be drawn to. And it feels to me like in-person things are again going to be more interesting than online OpenSea flipping. I don't know what you think about that, Jean-Jacques or Marlène.
In person, I think all the like community events like NFC Lisbon coming up, for example, early June, and people love to congregate and meet and discuss and spending time together. Of course, I think we need some kind of excuse in a way where it's like, oh yeah, let's go to NFC Lisbon and let's see some art and let's see friends. And I can't think we can only live remotely forever.
Yeah,
Without.
I just don't see that idea came to my mind because you're talking about flipping. I don't see that in 2026, 7, 8, people are going to return to flipping NFTs as frequent because we have AI. Like, why would you just give an agent and yeah, you handle my collection or whatever, you flip for me? I much rather go and have a look in a gallery and have a drink and meet some friends and discuss the art or the innovation or whatever than screw around on behind my desktop.
Also, it's not stocks and options for me, and I think this is where sometimes collectors are confused. It's not. I mean, you can flip stocks and bonds and options, but and make money out of it, and it's true that this is a trading day-to-day activity. But for art, even for digital art, it doesn't make much sense. Again, you need time, and if you want to make a good investment, we say that the minimum investment in art is 5 years. So already when you buy something, you should always wait 5 years until you offer it to the market. That's an important marker. But for your question about physicality versus living online, I also believe that we are physical beings. It's true that a lot of actually, metaverses didn't work out because at the end of the day, we cannot have the same experiment online than what we can when we are together. And what I found astonishing in the Web3 space is actually the fact that it's digital art. So a lot of most of the transactions happen online, most of the works exist online. But this is the most community-oriented segment in the art market, where people gather, where people organize events, where people spend a lot of time together and growing humanly the space. And so it's quite antithetic somehow. But I really like that dimension in Web3. And as Jean-Jacques said, we're going to Lisbon together. And then there will be Art Basel. So it's by doing that, we're also part of the agenda of contemporary art in general as well. That is also based on those events through the year.
I found it also fascinating that Web3, I mean, we think we are very advanced somehow in the art world. I believe this is kind of because of the tech, but we miss so much fundamentals, like what you just explained, Marlene, like, yeah, a collector I can't imagine like a collector going to White Cube, being able to get a very in-demand artist because they purchased a lot before, of course, flipping the work for tax loss harvesting the day after on something like the eBay of art. But also, I'm not even sure that people realize the damage they do to the entire ecosystem by doing so. Even though you have this libertarian way of thinking that, yeah, you can do whatever you want, it's on chain, it's contract code based and so on. But they're just like shooting themselves in the foot by doing so in a way. So I'm glad we have more people like you, Marlene, who can like also share your knowledge and insights about the more traditional art world to help understand better the dynamics of the market in a fully digital community where we are, I think, well-intentioned, but some people, of course, are not. But overall, I think people are thriving to make the space evolve. And we might do mistakes simply because we just don't think about the consequences all the time, and we don't learn from centuries of art trading markets. So after La Collection, Marlene, what happened next
Yes, so it was last year at the end of the year when they decided on the liquidation. And so I decided to then work for another gallery, Danae, that is based in Paris as well. I love also to work for a French company as well, because I feel like we have the Americans, as always, are taking like always a strong power position. And so it's always interesting, I think, as European, that we position ourselves. And they have the same DNA as La Collection, which was working a lot with museums, with institutions, also working with artists that work at the intersection. So artists that are not necessarily only code-based artists, but also artists who are doing physical components, sculptures, who are connected to painting. And I think as someone coming from the traditional art markets somehow, and who also, I also believe that we are in that era where artists are medium fluid, and we see it with Jean-Jacques quite a lot. Like, you're going to do digital art, but you're working with wood, and then you want to work with mirrors, and then you're exploring also, physical prints. I mean, you've been looking at a lot of different medium in plasticity, and I think this is where artists are going. So putting also everyone in the purely digital system is not necessarily fair. So yeah, so for me, that's why I chose that gallery as well. I feel their DNA was matching my curatorial line as well.
And could you tell us a little bit more about Danae and what you strive for as a gallery? You mentioned like fluidity from a medium standpoint, more connection with museum and institutions. Is there anything else, or what would be the plans for the future?
Yeah, so first we have, which is a change from La Collection, we have a physical place in Paris, a physical space where we have a curatorial program through the year. The space is located between the Louvre and Bourse du Commerce, the François Pinault, so it's quite a strategic position. And then I will continue to work with Danae with institutions, and we have a big project coming up with the BNF, La Bibliothèque Nationale de France, who wants to actually innovate also in contemporary art. And they've asked us to create a cultural program on digital art for 3 years at least. So we're working on that exciting project at the moment as well. And we want to continue being present at art fairs and community events such as NFC Lisbon, but also Art Basel. We should do also Paris Photo this year in November. So the idea is really to be very present, not only in France, but also internationally, continue working with museums and institutions with this BNF project. But we also have actually a project, not with a museum, but with the Bristol Hotel, that is very much connected to contemporary art. And that work, I think, is helpful as well for digital art, to position digital art in art history. And yes, also the heart of it, I mean, behind all of it, it's really working with artists long term, helping them build their career. And I really believe that this is also, I mean, we were again talking about the traditional art galleries. Their role in building the artist's career was really important. And if they were not with those people, I don't think their career would be where it is today. So it's also this dialogue between artists and curators and galleries that we want to do in the most traditional way. Because I also believe that, yes, we are trying to not break the system, but the Web3 space is trying to also bring something new to the system, which I love. I think it's super important. But in some ways, there is also an existing system. And in order to grow all together, we have to follow part of those rules.
And I think you opened recently a new space in Milano. Is it correct?
Well, it's not a space, but we have an activity in Milan and also in New York.
Okay. Great.
So it's not a space yet, but it's like we have parts of the team that are in both of those locations, and our strategy is to activate more and more projects in those regions.
Great. And if you had any advice to give, let's say, a young artist starting, I don't know, today, or who is listening to us right now, what kind of insights would you share with them to help them grow their career?
Well, I would say the first part of it is the depth of their practice. And that depth, you build it with time and also with understanding of art history. I think artists that have this whole picture are obviously able to integrate themselves in continuity and really develop new things. But I also believe that they have to they have to find the balance between digging their practice, building works, making works, without being too much influenced by the market. And I think that's something that is very difficult, because when they start thinking like commercial prices, which is the role of the gallery, for me it's a bit, it can have an impact on their creativity. So I would really say be focused on your practice, create depth, create works that speak to you, that connects to who you are as a being as well. I'm currently building a show on art and face, and it's interesting because it's based on a book by Vasily Kandinsky called Concerning the Spiritual in Art. And what I found groundbreaking is that in the 20s, Kandinsky was saying that now it's time for artists to connect to their inner being, to create. And this is where they can actually make the best work. And I really like that dimension. And then I think, of course, there is the market, and artists cannot avoid the market. And we still see that artists who met the right collectors, who met the right connections, also in terms of curators, are progressing their career faster than the others. So I would also tell young artists to network, find the right people who are believing in their practice and who are willing to push them also through those different steps.
Great, thank you. That's good, certainly good advice. Regarding the yourself or Danae, what are the plans for the future beyond what you already mentioned with the BNF programs? Is there anything you can share at this point?
Well, I think there is also more on my part. I'm also building an art consultancy, and as I said in the introduction, I already had a consultancy in London, and I think this is important for me because the curatorial side is obviously the first part of the process. But then in order to have a strong market, we need to have strong collectors who believe in that market and who continue to support it, as Nick was saying when we were talking about how the top galleries develop themselves. So I'm going to develop that as well in parallel to my curatorial activity. Today, I think the main element for the gallery today is really to develop themselves internationally, because the gallery is quite well known in France. It has good PR in France. It has good representation in Paris. But now the strategy is really to expand and go global.
And for the art advisory, so could you explain what it is for some people, I don't know, who may not know what that is? And do you plan to work more with private collectors or institutions, or could you let us know a little bit more about that?
Yes, the idea is to work with private collectors, which is something I have done in the past 10 years anyway. But the new element that I want to develop today is actually to work with traditional art buyers who want to buy new media, and reverse, like digital art buyers who want to buy traditional contemporary art. Because I feel like creating this intersection where actually both worlds are colliding is gonna be an asset for not only Web3 space, but I think it's also very exciting for contemporary art collectors to look at new era, new categories of art. And a lot of them are exciting by the digital art world, but they don't know where to start and they don't necessarily have the knowledge. It's a bit what Nick, you were saying for traditional contemporary art. When you don't have the knowledge, you don't want to jump into it because you're worried about your decisions. I think it's the same both ways. I want to participate also in those conversations.
Can you identify a little bit what kind of traditional art collector, or is it variable? But maybe can you identify what kind of people that are? Because the people that I meet, they're like, absolutely hell no.
Yes, a lot of them are like that. You are totally right. But there are so many. And actually, our target is more the top collections today, the top foundations. And those people are interested into Web3. First, they have the financial means, to be able to take those kind of risks. And actually, it's not a risk for me, who is from this part of the scope. If I was an investor today and if I had money, actually, I would buy digital art, because this is where you're going to have the strongest leverage. So if you buy well, this is really where you're going to explode. Your collection is going to explode, because what we are experiencing today is what the YBAs were experiencing in the early 2000s, those artists that actually exploded around 2010. So we are at that moment. Actually, for people who are passionate into art, who are also interested in investment, because yes, people love art, but they also want to buy the right things, and they also want to make sure that they are going to build an heritage that's not going to lose value, and even better, that's going to increase in value. I think digital arts, new media is one of the right categories today to invest in.
Can I ask something hard? What's your take on people?
Well, it's so interesting because first, again, you have to picture myself. I am from the traditional contemporary art. I'm an art historian. So I was skeptical at first, as a lot of people from my world were. But then I digged into what it did. And for me, this guy is really an artist at heart. I mean, he spent thousands of days working like a very focused and passionate person on his project. And there is this strong creativity, but also strong connection to society. And what is art actually? Art has to speak about what we are today. And when you look at Renaissance art, what is the most interesting is the artworks that are telling you at that time, this happened and this was groundbreaking. And I think Beeple's practice is actually so much connected to what we are living as a society, especially politically speaking, but not only. And also, I was mentioning that I think what's super important for artists is to focus. And when you look at how he built his practice, this is one of the most focused people or maybe artists I've ever met. And also, he's been so generous. I mean, he's been like giving basically all of his artworks at the beginning, and again for years. He's the one who created open source. He is one of the first to actually allow people to access what he created. So for me, after the time that it took, because of course at first it's disturbing, and we see today so many press from Hyperallergic to Beeple's installation now in Berlin as well. We see a lot of criticism, we see a lot of skepticism, but those people, for me, haven't digged what Beeple has built in detail. They are just looking at the superficiality, and they're actually not understanding what is at stake. So for me,
I think a lot of artists, even in the Web3 space, they still think it's disgusting. It's a stupid joke.
Exactly, but it's not. And for me, you know, Duchamp, when Duchamp was doing his ready-made, he was taking a shower in New York, and he was telling this is art. And he was taking like a l'urinoir, and he sent it to an art contest. And of course, they were like, this guy is the most stupid artist ever. Marcel Duchamp changed art history, and is still today an artist. And for me, Beeple might be one of those actually. And I say it from a traditional art historian and someone who know both worlds. Maybe I'm wrong, but I look forward to see where he's going to go. And also, I discussed with him. I would actually love to have him in my project at the BNF. So I discussed him with him and Scott about that, and we actually might work together. But I'm also speaking from the perspective of someone who spoke to him directly. And yeah, I think he's a very strong artist. And again, what's interesting is that the strongest ones are always rejected at first. And this is also interesting. The Impressionists were completely rejected. Duchamp was completely rejected. And
if I bring my judgmental, harsh, and obviously also my own taste in it, I have much more respect, and I think people in history will look much better than Refik Anadol, for example. Whereas Refik Anadol at the moment has no criticism. They're very aesthetic, all these things. But I don't need to tell you, I don't think the criticisms that he has is that it's always the same and it's nothing new, and it's, you know, it's just a piece of furniture at the end of the day. I have a stronger feeling that this is much overhyped, or that's not as strong as something as People, and definitely not as strong as a whole variety of artists that are unseen at the moment.
I totally agree with you. And again, we are back to the depth of the work that is key. Mm-hmm. Either you do something pretty, very aesthetic, but that has no depth, then it's easier to sell. Or you make something maybe more difficult, but that really has depth. And the genius of this world, find a way to do both. Like people like Rothko, if we talk about post-war art, I think is one of those artists. And this is why at auction, Rothko paintings for me are 80 millions, 100 millions, because he mastered that combination of an aesthetic that is beautiful and pleasing and so much depth behind it.
I think it's Damien Hirst who said that find something which is extremely scary and make it look nice. That's kind of an interesting summary of strong conceptual anchor and making it easily absorbable by the collectors in a way. I'm curious, Marlene, when you work with this institution or very traditional art collecting entities, do you know what are their main objections about digital art, and what could we do as digital artists to make your life easier to place these works into these kind of collections?
Well, the first element, the first barrier for me is that a lot of them do not have curators in new media that know enough of Web3 art. And we see the institutions that have really pushed on the topic are the institutions who have that staff. So for instance, Centre Pompidou, they have Philippe Bettinelli and Marcela Lista, who are experts in new media and who have also an amazing knowledge in Web3 and art and tech, and who have been working in that sphere for years. So having internally this knowledge for institutions, then they have the trust, they have the confidence to go further. And so that's why Pompidou kept buying. But I think that the main element has to come from institutions realizing that Web3 and art and tech is a very important category now, and that they have to recruit curators that are going to support them in that field. And then I feel it's also a question of, it's a question of affinity. For instance, the MAC Lyon, the museum where I am in Lyon, they have been working with new media forever. They built the first biennale in art and tech in the 90s. So it's also the affinity of the directors of those institutions with the medium. And I think there is another challenge that is quite important for institutions, is that when you're a public space and you need to open a wallet, who is holding the key? Because people are going to change. And it's always a very, very strong challenge. And in France, for instance, they had to go through the financial authority of the French government to put a new process in place. So the wallet of those institutions are protected. And I think this requires, quite a new system. And it's not only, I guess, that part of, having your wallet and storing your artworks digitally. It's also this element of conservation. Conservation for painting is something quite well known. It's something quite structured. Museums know what to do. But conservation in Web3 for blockchain art, code art, for computer-based art, it's really tricky. And I think they need to grow that expertise as well. And it would be very interesting to have something global as well on the topic, something European, something American, that all institutions can rely on to make sure that they are reassured about the longevity of their artworks.
Do you think it's a lack of access to the proper resources about conservation, or the proper resources are just non-existing at the moment?
I think it's not entirely existing. Also because we are talking about technologies that are now. So it's easy to speak about an oil painting and to think how you will conserve it because it exists in centuries and we know it's been analyzed, we know how it works. But for a smart contract artwork on a blockchain, first there are so many blockchains that are disappearing as well. And I mean, there is so much ephemerality on the new media sphere. And it's not only the video, but there is so many. It's not one thing. It's so many things. And I feel like for Web3, each artwork is unique and each artwork needs a proper conservation strategy. I know there is not enough today on the topic. And I know it's an important conversation. Regina from the New Museum in New York is always having. She's one of the very knowledgeable people in the sphere on that topic. But it's not enough, and institutions should work on that, probably globally.
That's fascinating. I know Rhizome also has been a long-standing resource about data retrieval, for example. I know when an artist died in a plane, they could recover the hard drive, and they've done a few things and many other things like that. But Yeah, there's no consortium or no ISO standard right now to how to preserve new media art on chain, at least. And even as an artist, we know like pinning, IPFS, all this kind of geeky stuff which change all the time. But it's very challenging to find a permanent solution. Even when you are producing the artwork and you want to do your best to kind of make sure it can stand the test of time. Yeah, hopefully we can see more resources like this very soon. All right. And any other maybe interesting books you would recommend to traditional collectors who like to be more familiar with new media art, or if not books, maybe other resources you would recommend? Or I don't know how you approach people who never collected new media art, and how do you help them to kind of understand a little bit more about what's going on?
Yes, what is good is that we have more and more publications on the topic, especially from the past 5 years. Because when I started in the space, I wanted to read about it, but there was almost nothing. But today you have on NFTs actually by Taschen. I think that is good because traditional collectors, they know Taschen, they follow it, they probably already have books by Taschen. And Robert Tales did this important edition that I think is one of the most exhaustive book on art and tech today. But then you also have maybe by topic books that are very interesting. For instance, Centre Pompidou published this year a book on AI that I think is really interesting and really focused on that type of art. And in terms of publication, Right Click Save, the media, who followed the space and digital art since decades, has also published a book on their main articles on the topic. So I would say those three, and like that, it's good. It's like one traditional brand that collectors will recognize, then publications that are follow the daily lives of the Web3 space, and then the book by Pompidou that is a bit more on contemporary art and art historical perspective of AI.
Amazing. Great. Well, thank you very much, Marlene.
Thanks to you both.
Any other questions, Nick, or anything else you would like to mention, Marlene?
Well, I'd like to get your perspective both, actually. Jean-Jacques as an artist and Nick as a collector. What are your perspectives of the space, and how do you see it evolve?
I have no idea what will work at the end. I believe that there is going to be a resurgence of this because I think there's going to be a second cycle of this. I don't know how many traditional collectors will become interested. I think with the increase of price or increase of a second hype, more traditional people might lean over a little bit more. But I also see a lot of industry experts, art experts talk about we need books, we need university programs. It needs to become part of the art history curriculum. Museums, we need more institutions. I think that we're actually pretty well represented in institutions in the meantime. I think all these like little factors help. But fortunately or unfortunately, I think the real move is going to be how will the financial headlines of secondary markets or 50 million for one piece or some stupid stuff like this will actually push the next cycle. That's what I think. For me personally, as a collector, I'm okay with the fact that it's a very niche thing at the moment.
Yeah, and for me, I've been doing this for 25 years now, so it feels like I have no choice in a way. I always love looking at where the puck is going for speaking as a VC, even though we said VC in the art world might not be the best mix, even though we have great exceptions to that. I believe we have great collectors who have outstanding VCs. So I think we need multiple breakthrough on multiple fronts. I think the way you display new media art in a private setting has to evolve because a screen with a dangling cable is not going to make it, for sure not. Also trying to replicate the screen, even though if it's well presented, I think we still miss something when I look at a painting, or if I look at a work from Harold Cohen or Vera Molnar, which is physically on paper. For me, there is always this kind of fascination, and maybe it's a bit of a fetish somehow, that the work has been through the hands of the artist, themselves. And I found this still fascinating. I don't know, when I go to Rodin Museum in Paris, which I love very much, and you look at all of this and you see like the fingerprints of the artist on the works, and there is, I think we kind of lack this, maybe this personal connection and attachment to our work. And I keep thinking about what you mentioned, Marlene, about, reselling the work too fast. And I'm like, why people do this? Obviously, there is the financial upside to that, but also maybe they lack attachment to the work, because you wouldn't sell a family member for financial upside. This is an extreme example, but maybe the fact that it's purely digital and very much transactional, you kind of have no shame about flipping it for one reason or the other. Whereas, I don't know, if you have like an artwork you really care about, you really love, you would not think about selling it.
I mean, the reality is with this flipping thing is like the art side of NFTs on a volume based was completely irrelevant compared to the rest of NFTs. It only is relevant now because it's the last thing that people actually care about, because it's something real. But the volume of it was similar to meme coins. It's nothing. It's something that existed out of the brokenness of financial systems and regulation and frustration of people who are poor or who are struggling. They've started flipping stupid NFTs. so I think, but I think we all know now, hey, this doesn't work. So I think hopefully in the second go there is going to be the healthiness will keep it going for a little bit longer.
Sure, it will. Great. Thank you very much, Marlene, for being on the podcast today, and thank you everyone for listening. And we're all looking forward to see the forthcoming exhibition of Danae